Hello, welcome to ITEXPS YouTube video series. Today we are going to talk about web services. What is web service? A web service can be defined by following ways. It is a client-server application or application component for communication. The method of communication between two devices over the network. It is a software system for the interoperable machine-to-machine communication. It is a collection of standards or protocols for exchanging information between two devices or application. As you can see in the figure, Java, .NET, and PHP applications can communicate with other applications through web service over the network. For example, the Java application can interact with Java, .NET, and PHP applications. So web service is a language-independent way of communication. Web services advantages. We already understand why web services came about in the first place, which was to provide a platform which could allow different applications to talk to each other. But let's look at the list of web services advantages for why it is important to use web services. Exposing business functionality on the network. A web service is a unit of managed code that provides some sort of functionality to client applications or end users. This functionality can be invoked over the HTTP protocol, which means that it can also be invoked over the internet. Nowadays all applications are on the internet, which makes the purpose of web services more useful. That means the web service can be anywhere on the internet and provide the necessary functionality as required. Interoperability amongst applications. Web services allow various applications to talk to each other and share data and services among themselves. All types of applications can talk to each other. So instead of writing specific code which can only be understood by specific applications, you can now write generic code that can be understood by all applications. A standardized protocol which everybody understands. Web services use standardized industry protocol for the communication. All the 4 layers: service transport, XML messaging, service description, and service discovery layers uses well-defined protocols in the web services protocol stack. Reduction in cost of communication. Web services use SOAP over HTTP protocol, so you can use your existing low-cost internet for implementing web services. How web services work. The above diagram shows a very simplistic view of how a web service would actually work. The client would invoke a series of web service calls via requests to a server which would host the actual web service. These requests are made through what is known as remote procedure calls. Remote procedure calls are calls made to methods which are hosted by the relevant web service. As an example, Amazon provides a web service that provides prices for products sold online via Amazon.com. The front-end or presentation layer can be in .NET or Java. But either programming language would have the ability to communicate with the web service. The main component of a web service design is the data which is transferred between the client and the server. And that is XML. XML extensible markup language is a counterpart to HTML. Easy to understand the intermediate language that is understood by many programming languages. So when applications talk to each other, they actually talk in XML. This provides a common platform for application developed in various programming languages to talk to each other. Web services use something known as SOAP, Simple Object Access Protocol, for sending the XML data between applications. The data is sent over normal HTTP. The data which is sent from the web service to the application is called a SOAP message. The SOAP message is nothing but an XML document. Since the document is written in XML, the client application calling the web service can be written in any programming language. Why do you need a web service? Modern-day business applications use variety of programming platforms to develop web-based applications. Some applications may be developed in Java, others in .NET, while some other in AngularJS, Node.js. Most often than not, these heterogeneous applications need some sort of communication to happen between them. Since they are built using different development languages, it becomes really difficult to ensure accurate communication between applications. Here is where web services come in. Web services provide a common platform that allows multiple applications built on various programming languages to have the ability to communicate with each other. Web service components. There are 3 major web service components. SOAP, WSDL, UDDI, SOAP. SOAP is an acronym for Simple Object Access Protocol. SOAP is a XML-based protocol for accessing web services. SOAP is a W3C recommendation for communication between applications. SOAP is XML-based, so it is platform-independent and language-independent. In other words, it can be used with Java, .NET or PHP language on any platform. WSDL. WSDL is an acronym for Web Services Description Language. WSDL is a XML document containing information about web services such as method name, method parameter and how to access it. WSDL is a part of UDDI. It acts as an interface between web service applications. WSDL is pronounced as WSDL. UDDI. UDDI is an acronym for Universal Description, Discovery, and Integration. UDDI is a XML-based framework for describing, discovering and integrating web services. UDDI is a directory of web service interfaces described by WSDL, containing information about web services. SOAP Web Services. SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. It is a XML-based protocol for accessing web services. SOAP is a W3C recommendation for communication between two applications. SOAP is XML-based protocol. It is platform-independent and language-independent. By using SOAP, you will be able to interact with other programming language applications. Advantages of SOAP Web Services. SOAP defines its own security known as WS security. SOAP Web Services can be written in any programming language and executed in any platform. Disadvantages of SOAP Web Services. Slow. SOAP uses XML format that must be parsed to be read. It defines many standards that must be followed while developing the SOAP applications. So it is slow and consumes more bandwidth than resource. WSDL dependent. SOAP uses WSDL and does not have any other mechanism to discover the service. SOAP versus REST Web Services. SOAP is a protocol. REST is an architectural style. SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. SOAP cannot use REST because it is a protocol. REST can use SOAP Web Services because it is a concept and can use any protocol like HTTP, SOAP. SOAP uses services interfaces to expose the business logic. REST uses URI to expose business logic. JAX-WS is the Java API for SOAP Web Services. JAX-RS is the Java API for RESTful Web Services. SOAP defines standards to be strictly followed. REST does not define too much standards like SOAP. SOAP requires more bandwidth and resource than REST. REST requires less bandwidth and resource than SOAP. SOAP defines its own security. RESTful web services inherit security measures from the underlying transport. SOAP permits XML data format only. REST permits different data formats such as plain text, HTML, XML, JSON. SOAP is less preferred than REST. REST more preferred than SOAP. What is a REST API? REST representational state transfer refers to a set of specific rules that dictate how web service applications communicate over the Internet. Therefore, a RESTful API is an API that follows these rules, providing flexibility, bandwidth, and speed advantages to software integrations and communications. REST APIs serve as the middleman between your client and your host server, fielding resource requests and delivering responses via HTTP. In a REST design, the client initiates the interaction. For example, accessing a web page via a URL is a commonly used HTTP request. How does a REST API work? To understand how RESTful APIs transfer data between clients and applications, it helps to split the operation into two processes. Client request. A client is a program or person who accesses the services of the API. For example, your program would be the client if you were integrating with a web application like Instagram or YouTube. Your browser would be the client if you were requesting a URL. The most common HTTP methods are GET, to retrieve a resource; POST, to create a new resource; PUT, to edit or update an existing resource; DELETE, to delete a resource. An HTTP request to Instagram API, for instance, might be a GET request for a specific video or a POST request to upload a new photo. Similarly, a call center platform integrating with an auto attendant application might use the PUT command to update a custom greeting or the DELETE command to remove it. Server response. A resource refers to the specific information an API provides to a client. This could be anything from hashtags to profiles, comments, web addresses, tweets. All resources have a unique name called a resource identifier, and they are all stored on a server. When a client makes a request using a RESTful API, the server transfers a standardized representation of the resource's state to the client's system. This means the server does not send the client the actual resource but a representation of its state. The state of the resource at a particular timestamp. Responses are sent back in a lightweight format to aid interpretability. The JSON JavaScript object notation format is popular because it is readable by both humans and machines and excels in its strides toward promoting web accessibility. It is also compatible with many other programming languages. Some alternative API data formats include XML, YAML, CSV, HTML, and plain text. REST API constraints. While REST APIs are appreciated for their simplicity and flexibility, they still have to adhere to 6 constraints to be considered RESTful. Client-server separation. REST explicitly constrains the communication capabilities of both client and server. The client exclusively makes requests, while the server exclusively responds to these. Therefore, the client initiates every interaction, who knows the URI of the requested resource. The server responds by passing on the requested data without the capability to make independent modifications. Uniform interface. Applications and servers can be written in many different languages. Without an intermediary, any correspondence between a client and server risks being poorly translated. So, for the client and server to communicate effectively while also existing independently, they require a uniform interface. Stateless. A fundamental principle of REST APIs is that all calls are stateless. This means all client-server interactions are independent tasks. Every request sent to the server from the client is a brand new request. The given request contains all of the information the server requires to perform a response. Meaning the server does not need to remember any information about past requests. Cacheable. Because stateless APIs are designed to increase request overhead by handling a large amount of incoming and outbound calls, REST APIs should prioritize data caching. Caching refers to the storage of data on a client's device and is used to save server resources and increase bandwidth. If the data is cacheable, the API will include the specific length of time the information is cacheable for. Once this time has expired, the client will ping the server for updates. Layered system. It is essential to recognize that there are typically multiple servers existing between the client and server endpoints. The intermediary layers between the client and server exist to construct a hierarchical system that balances operations, like traffic distribution and caching. These layers operate independently from each other, increasing their architectural stability and further cementing the decoupling of the client and server endpoints. Code on demand. Unlike the other principles, code on demand is optional in a REST design. It is a feature that permits an API to send run-on-demand code snippets or applets to a client, extending client functionality. What is stateful? To understand what the word stateful refers to, let us look at an analogy. Consider the scenario of a telephone call. In this case, the connection is maintained from the beginning to the end of the call to ensure continuous communication. The connection is validated first, and only then will the session be established indefinitely until the end of the talk. This is exactly what a stateful protocol is. If a client delivers a request to the server in a stateful protocol, it expects a response of some sort. If it does not receive a response, it will send the request again. However, the major feature of stateful is that it maintains the state of all its sessions. Be it an authentication session, or a client as request for information. Stateful are those that may be used repeatedly, such as online banking or email. They are carried out in the context of prior transactions in which the states are stored. And what happened in previous transactions may have an impact on the current transaction. Because of this, stateful apps use the same servers every time they perform a user request. An example of stateful is FTP file transfer protocol. For the course of an FTP session, which often includes many data transfers, the client establishes a control connection. After this, the data transfer takes place. Advantages of stateful. Stateful protocol keeps track of the connection information. And as a result, delivers superior performance because of continually keeping track of information. Stateful protocols are more intuitive because they can maintain data on the server between two requests. They can improve performance when data retrieval is required only once. Disadvantages of stateful. Stateful protocol requires memory allocation in order to store data. In the event of inefficient maintenance of session storage, there can be a decrease in the performance. It requires continuous management of the service's full lifecycle. These protocols are highly dependent on the server-side state. Usually, stateful protocols require backing storage. Since the state is maintained, stateful is not very secure. What is stateless? Consider the event of sending an SMS. Here, the receiver availability is not confirmed, and the sender just sends the SMS to the recipient. There is no confirmation from the receiving device to the sending device that the message has been received. Despite being transmitted, the communication may or may not be received. There can be no cross-verification of status or retries. A stateless protocol is one in which the receiver is not required to keep session state from previous requests. The sender sends relevant session state to the receiver in such a way that each request may be interpreted without reference to prior request session state, which the receiver retains. HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol is an example of stateless protocol. Because each request is executed independently of the requests that came before it. This implies that once a transaction is completed, the connection between the browser and the server is also terminated. Advantages of stateless. Since the monitoring system does not have to look beyond a single request to determine its whole nature, visibility of the protocol is improved. It is easier to recover from partial failures like crashes since no state is maintained, which improves reliability. The server does not have to store session state between requests. Hence, scalability is enhanced as deploying the services to any number of servers is possible, and implementation is simplified even more. It only necessitates a small number of resources because the system does not need to keep track of communication over numerous lines, as well as session information. In stateless protocols, each individual communication is unconnected and distinct from the ones that come before or after it. Here, each packet of data travels on its own. There is no need to refer to another packet in these packets. Disadvantages of stateless. It may be essential to include additional information in each request, and as a result, the server will need to interpret this new information. They may degrade network performance by increasing the amount of repetitive data delivered in a series of requests, which cannot be saved and reused. They are inherently less capable as they do not store information about a particular user session. Difference between microservice and web service. Microservices. It is a software architecture that can be implemented with web service. These are horizontal in approach and nature. It is considered as an autonomous application designed for a single, specific service as a part of a large application. Microservices are more complex and compact. These are limited in sharing by bounded context. Web services. It is just technology for providing services. These are vertical in nature, in comparison to provider-consumer communication. It acts as a strategy to facilitate service availability across applications by a web interface. Web services are simpler as compared to microservice. Web services allow the sharing of components. What to consider while designing web services. 1. Site purpose. Like a mission statement, a website purpose gives the primary reason for the site's existence in the world. Whether for education, advocacy, service provision, community organizing. The main purpose of the site will ultimately inform design and content decisions. 2. Target audiences. You cannot design with everyone in mind. That is why there are so many different kinds of cars, clothes, computing devices. If you identify and design to your top 2 audiences, the site is more likely to accomplish your organization's goals. 3 Site objectives. Like the objectives in your organization's strategic plan, and if you do not have one of those, you have bigger concerns than your website. The objectives for your website outline the main goals of the site. 4 Responsive, mobile-friendly design. Responsive design means that a website's design automatically resizes to fit the screen size on which it is being viewed. It can be difficult to retrofit an existing site with responsiveness. It is mostly more cost-effective to do a complete redesign. 5 Fresh content. We go back to websites if we know the content will change and there will be new stuff for us to view. Work on a content strategy for your site that will ensure people keep coming back. 6 Engaging content. It is a documented fact that people only read about 20 to 28% of the text on a web page. Hence the shift to shorter blocks of text, lots of photos, and use of multimedia on websites. 7 Features. Features are the elements that make a site dynamic and interesting, like donation buttons, online forms, embedded video or podcasts, online quizzes, social media buttons, integration, and all other manner of gadgets and widgets. 8 Search engine optimization. 48% of internet users start their online experience with a search engine. This means you will want to make sure your site is optimized for search. While there are companies who do SEO and nothing but, their services tend to be beyond the budget of most nonprofits. Fortunately, there are quite a few SEO tasks you or your web developer can DIY. 9 Site maintenance. There are 2 main costs associated with a website design. Project the cost for site design, and development and ongoing site maintenance costs. Site design tends to be a lump sum cost. Site maintenance can vary greatly, depending on the developer. 10 Accessibility. By this I mean compliance of a nonprofit's website with Section 508 of the Americans with Disabilities Act ADA. While I think it is important for all websites to be accessible, I feel like the nonprofit sector especially has a moral obligation to this. Inclusion and social justice are in our sector's DNA, which should carry over in the design of our websites. Web Services interview questions for freshers. Explain different types of web services. There are basically 2 types of web services. SOAP Simple Object Access Protocol Web Services. It is also referred to as Transport Independent Messaging Protocol, whose main purpose is to transfer a message, and is based on XML protocol. RESTful Representational State Transfer Web Services. It is developed to fulfill the shortcomings of SOAP and to make the web services more effective. What are the important features of web services? Some of the important features of web services include: use to standardized XML messaging system. Not tied to any one programming language or any operating system. Discoverable via a simple find mechanism. Available over the internet or private networks. Supports loosely coupled connections between systems. Can be synchronous or asynchronous. Supports the transparent exchange of data to facilitate business integration. Supports communication among different apps with HTML, XML, WSDL, SOAP. Supports RPC remote procedure calls. What are RESTful web services? REST representational state transfer is a stateless client-server architecture style used for developing applications that are accessible over the web. It is a type of web service whose main goal is to make web services more effective. It can be defined as the web service that uses HTTP methods for implementing the REST architecture. Unlike SOAP, which is protocol-based, RESTful services are architecturally based. It does not contain any contract or WSDL file. What are the different components of web services? There are various components of web services as given below. SOAP Simple Object Access Protocol. UDDI Universal Description, Discovery, and Integration. WSDL Web Services Description Language. RDF Resource Description Framework. XML Extensible Markup Language. Write the difference between API and web services. API Application Programming Interface. It acts as an interface between 2 devices so that they can communicate with each other without any user intervention. Some of its features include customizable, easy integration with GUI, time-effective, language-independent. All APIs are not web services. Web service, it facilitates interaction between two devices over a network. They are widely used for exchanging data among systems or applications. Some of its features include loosely coupled, supports document exchange, interoperability, extensibility. All web services are APIs. Name the tools that are used to test web services. There are various tools used to test web services given below. SOAP UI, Poster, Postman, REST Client, JMeter. What are the advantages of RESTful web service? There are several advantages of RESTful web services as given below. Platform independent. Simple and easy to implement and test. Support different formats such as JSON, XML, HTML. Can be written in different programming languages and executed on any platform. Lightweight, manageable, scalable, and reusable. Faster and provide better performance. Consume less bandwidth than resources. A lot of automation framework is available. Name HTTP methods that can be used with RESTful web services. Some of the HTTP methods that can be used with RESTful web services include: GET, used to get and read a resource. POST, used to create a new resource. PUT, used to update existing resources. DELETE, used to delete the resource. PATCH, used to apply partial modifications to a resource. Which protocol is used by RESTful web services? The protocol used by RESTful web services is HTTP. What do you mean by UDDI? UDDI Universal Description, Discovery, and Integration is a directory service used for describing, publishing, and finding web services. It is also used for creating business registries. It is based on a set of web standards including HTTP, XML, SOAP, WSDL, XML schema. Its main goal is to streamline digital transactions and e-commerce among company systems. Thank you for watching this video. We provide hands-on training with labs, homework, group projects. Prepare you for the certification. Provide real projects. Internship opportunities. Support you and resume LinkedIn. Staffing support. Provide tech references. In-person online class. Class retake options and more. Call us at 847-350-9034 for your free career consultation meeting. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for the latest videos.